The year it happened, nobody could believe the headlines. Not the staff who used to ignore him, not the professors who once called him invisible, and certainly not the board of trustees who barely remembered his name. But years ago, when a soft-spoken young man in his early 20s quietly scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans at the university that had all but written him off, he already knew something none of them did. That one day, he'd come back. Not as a student, not as an employee, but as the new owner of the entire institution. It all started in the spring semester of 2015. The campus was alive with chatter about football games, frat parties, and graduation ceremonies. But while most students walked with earbuds in and designer backpacks strapped to their shoulders, Marcus was pushing a janitor's cart across the marble floor of the administration building. No one spoke to him. No one asked how his day was going. If he was acknowledged at all, it was with a glance of mild annoyance when his mop bucket blocked the hallway. That didn't bother Marcus. He wasn't there for validation. He was there for survival. Born into a family of 5 in a crumbling apartment in the outskirts of Detroit, Marcus had grown up around leaky ceilings, overdue bills, and the sound of his mother crying behind the bathroom door after another job rejection. He'd always been smart, dangerously smart, the kind of kid who read college-level books by middle school but never said a word about it. He knew better than to draw attention to himself. In his neighborhood, smart kids went missing, or worse, ended up doing someone else's dirty work. He had received a partial scholarship to attend Ridgewell University, a prestigious private college known for its Gothic architecture and arrogant alumni. The scholarship didn't cover housing or food, so Marcus worked nights as a janitor, cleaning the very classrooms he sat in during the day. No one suspected. He was careful to clock in late at night and leave before sunrise, and he always kept his janitor's uniform folded neatly in a backpack behind a stack of art supplies in the supply closet. He showered in the gym, ate 1 meal a day, and spent every spare second in the library, reading finance books, decoding real estate markets, absorbing business law like it was oxygen. For 4 years, Marcus did this, in silence, in secret. But that's when things started getting strange. He noticed his student account had unexplained late fees. Then a course he had registered for mysteriously vanished from his transcript. Professors who once gave him A's began marking him absent, even when he sat in the front row. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But when he visited the registrar's office, the clerk avoided eye contact. A week later, his scholarship was revoked for non-compliance with academic standards, and the financial aid office claimed they had no record of his janitorial employment. It didn't make sense. Marcus kept every receipt, every copy of every email. But suddenly, none of it existed. That's when he realized someone was trying to erase him. He went straight to the dean's office with documentation in hand. The secretary gave him a condescending smile and told him the dean was unavailable. Every day that week, the answer was the same. Eventually, a security guard escorted him out of the building for harassment. Within a month, he was expelled from the university altogether. No hearing, no warning, no reason. Marcus didn't cry. He didn't shout. He packed his few belongings, turned in his keys, and walked off campus with his head high. Everyone assumed he'd disappear. Maybe go back to Detroit. Maybe never be heard from again. What they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that Marcus wasn't broken. He was focused. He moved to a low-income area in Chicago and worked 3 jobs: night cleaner, warehouse loader, and weekend dishwasher. Every dollar he saved went into online courses in finance, investing, and real estate acquisition. He watched YouTube lectures during bus rides. He listened to business podcasts while cleaning toilets. He didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for 3 years. But in that time, he learned everything about commercial real estate, mergers, nonprofit buyouts, and university charter law. Then, in 2019, he made his first purchase, a rundown duplex in Cleveland. He fixed it up himself, rented it out, flipped it, bought 2 more, then a small office building, then a hotel. By 2022, Marcus owned 14 properties and had quietly built a shell corporation with silent partners, including a few disgruntled former Ridgewell faculty who remembered him and knew the university's darkest secrets. That's when he discovered something unbelievable. Ridgewell University was in deep financial trouble. The school had covered it up for years, using creative accounting and backdoor donations, but a series of bad investments had drained their endowment. An audit had been delayed twice. Staff layoffs were imminent. Rumors swirled of a hostile buyout. The administration was desperate, but too proud to ask for help. So Marcus made them an offer. Through his holding company, he offered to invest a large sum in exchange for board influence. When the board hesitated, he quietly bought out one of the university's creditors, then another, then a third. Within 6 months, he held enough of the university's debt to control the outcome of any major decision. But he didn't reveal his identity, yet. Instead, he called a formal meeting with the board. They expected a wealthy investor. What they got was the janitor they'd once thrown out like trash, now in a tailored black suit, holding the deeds to half their buildings, and a legal team stacked with Ivy League graduates. The silence in the room was surgical. One board member asked if it was a joke. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents proving his ownership. Another asked what he wanted. Marcus simply said, "Everything you denied me." But just as the university was preparing to finalize the deal and announce him as the new executive chair, something strange happened again. The deal stalled. Emails went unanswered. Lawyers stopped picking up calls. The press release that had already been drafted was suddenly retracted. Then Marcus received an anonymous message. "Walk away. You don't know what you're uncovering." He thought it was a scare tactic, until his business partner's office in New York was raided under false pretenses. Then another ally vanished off the grid. His email was hacked. His accounts were flagged. But the final warning came when he returned to his condo one night and found his door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, nothing touched, except on the dining table, where a single page had been placed. It was a copy of his expulsion letter from Ridgewell University. But this version had something different. A name in the corner, a name he didn't recognize, L. Thornbridge. He ran a background check. Nothing came up. No public records, no faculty listing, no social media. But the IP address linked to the document had ties to an offshore account that was also connected, oddly, to a defense contractor. It made no sense. What did Ridgewell University have to do with international funding or black budget contracts? He went back to the university in person, demanding answers from the administration, who now acted like they didn't know who he was. The deal was off the table. Security was called again. But before he was forced out, he saw something through the dean's glass office window. A man in a gray suit with silver hair and an encrypted tablet open on the desk. When Marcus made eye contact, the man stood, walked calmly toward the exit, and disappeared down a back hallway guarded by biometric locks. And just like that, the university that Marcus thought he had conquered vanished behind a wall of red tape, missing records and untouchable silence. He wasn't dealing with stubborn bureaucrats anymore. He was dealing with something far deeper, something that didn't want him to know the truth about what had happened to him all those years ago, and what the university was really hiding. But Marcus wasn't done. He hired a private investigator. He launched a covert probe into Ridgewell's board members. He filed a FOIA request that bounced between agencies for over 30 days before getting a strange response. Request denied. National security exception. The phrase sent chills down his spine. What did a small private college have to do with national security? Then came the final twist. In a decrypted file sent anonymously to his burner phone, Marcus received surveillance photos. One of them showed a man walking into the Ridgewell administration building in 2015, the night Marcus was expelled. In the corner of the image was a timestamp, just 10 minutes before his janitor ID had been mysteriously revoked. The man wore the same gray suit, and his name? L. Thornbridge, and beneath that name, a government clearance code that made no sense. Now Marcus knew the truth wasn't buried. It was protected, and someone was willing to bury him for good to keep it that way. To this day, Marcus is missing from all official records at Ridgewell, but he's not gone. In fact, as of last month, reports surfaced that a new anonymous trust is buying up properties around the university again, quietly, one by one, and rumor has it, Ridgewell University might be for sale. The morning after the surveillance photo arrived, Marcus stood by the window of his Chicago high-rise, watching the city wake up beneath him. The steam rising from manholes, the flash of taxi headlights, the rhythm of life. It all looked normal. But he knew nothing around him was normal anymore. Not since the name L. Thornbridge cracked open a world he hadn't even known existed. Not since the university that once expelled him now acted like it never knew him. Not since the shadows began moving. Marcus wasn't scared. He'd lived through worse. But this wasn't about owning Ridgewell anymore. This was about what Ridgewell was hiding, and why they had erased him. The next move had to be careful, surgical. His team, what was left of it, operated under aliases now. Marcus changed phones every 48 hours, rerouted all communications through encrypted channels, and traveled only in black cars driven by vetted drivers. He'd already been followed once outside a coffee shop by a man pretending to be a food delivery guy. Marcus caught him snapping pictures through the reflection in the window. But this time, Marcus wasn't the janitor sweeping up other people's messes. This time, he was going to burn the building down if he had to. He made contact with a former Ridgewell professor named Dr. Elaine Miles, who had been fired suddenly in 2016 after questioning why the university's financial records were off by millions. At the time, she had assumed it was mismanagement. But now, after Marcus showed her what he'd discovered, offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified board members, her face turned pale. "I think Ridgewell's being used as a cover," she whispered. "It's a funnel for something big, something illegal or worse, classified." Marcus needed proof, something undeniable, something he could drop on every media outlet and government watchdog at once, but time was running out. Another lawyer in his network had gone missing 2 nights earlier. His condo had been wiped clean, like he never lived there. That night, Marcus broke into the one place that still held records, the old alumni archives in the library's west wing. The building had been sealed off for renovations, but Marcus knew the layout from his janitor days. He wore gloves, carried only a flashlight and a portable scanner, and moved like a shadow through the empty corridors. Inside, he found it. A dusty cabinet labeled Legacy Contributions, Restricted. He cracked it open and scanned the documents inside. Pages upon pages of anonymous donations tied to Ridgewell from as far back as 1994. Many of them connected to defense contractors, biotech firms, and shell companies that didn't exist in any federal database. But then came the real bomb, a file labeled Project Evergreen. It listed Ridgewell not as an academic institution, but as a research node. Under it were facility blueprints, access logs, funding requests for personnel trials, and a classified clearance level Marcus had only seen in spy thrillers. And on the final page, a contract, signed by L. Thornbridge. The document tied Ridgewell to a clandestine agency known only by initials, ASI, and confirmed that select students were being recruited, tracked, and in some cases surveilled as part of a long-term cognitive enhancement study. But one detail chilled Marcus to the bone. His name was listed as a failed candidate, potential leak risk. They hadn't just erased him to protect themselves. They had marked him for removal. He scanned everything, slipped the file back, and vanished into the night. By morning, he'd already sent encrypted copies to every major news outlet he could find, under different names, different proxies, bouncing signals across the globe. But only one replied. A journalist named Malcolm Trent. He'd done exposés on corporate espionage and whistleblowers before, and his name alone made governments sweat. He agreed to meet Marcus in person at a safe house on the outskirts of Chicago. But when Marcus arrived, the front door was already open. Inside, Malcolm was slumped in a chair, alive, but barely. His eyes were bloodshot. His laptop was fried. A message had been scrawled on the wall behind him in black marker. "This doesn't belong to you." Malcolm's voice cracked as he said, "They knew we were coming." Someone on the inside tipped them. Marcus knew then. It was bigger than media, bigger than the university, bigger than him. Still, he refused to back down. He pivoted. Instead of going public, he went silent. For the next 6 months, he restructured his companies, acquired new partners through anonymous trusts, and slowly began buying up not just Ridgewell's debt, but the land surrounding it. Old bookstores, dorm houses, cafes. Bit by bit, Ridgewell was becoming an island, and Marcus owned the ocean around it. In secret, he began constructing a plan that no one saw coming. On the 1-year anniversary of that final warning, the Ridgewell board received an urgent legal notice. The property beneath the university's business school, sold. The parking structure behind the science labs, sold. The land under the stadium, sold. Each deed had been acquired legally and quietly through Marcus's network. And now, with one final stroke, he made his move. Marcus bought the university, not through a hostile takeover, not with threats, but with silence. By the time Ridgewell's board realized what had happened, they no longer owned the majority of their own campus. A public announcement went live within the hour. Effective immediately, Ridgewell University would be restructured under new leadership, following an extensive internal audit, and a full investigation into its prior financial records would be conducted in cooperation with federal agencies. The university tried to fight it. They failed. And when Marcus walked into the main hall that morning, wearing the same black suit, with the same calm face, every staff member stopped and stared. No one said a word, no one had to. They knew. He wasn't the janitor anymore. He was their boss. He gave a press conference from the same podium that once denied him admission back to campus. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions. He answered only one. "I worked here once, cleaning your floors. Now I'm here to clean your house." But the story didn't end there. Because buried in the investigation that followed was something far darker. The classified project, Evergreen, was real, and deeper than anyone imagined. It wasn't just research. It was experimentation. Records emerged of students who had vanished, alumni who had died mysteriously after graduation, psychological assessments that had been falsified to mask long-term behavioral studies, and a paper trail that led to government-funded facilities in rural parts of the country operating under false names. Ridgewell had been a testing ground, not for education, but for control. And Marcus had walked right through its center. The fallout was nuclear. Congressional hearings were held. Subpoenas flew like confetti. Some members of the old board fled the country. Others tried to plead ignorance. One committed suicide days before his deposition. And in the middle of it all, Marcus stood, silent, unshaken, watching it all collapse like a house of cards. Reporters begged him for interviews. Book deals were offered. Hollywood came knocking. He turned them all down. Instead, he did something nobody expected. He renamed the university, the Langston Institute, named after his mother, who died 2 years before he took control. And instead of using the space for profit, he turned it into a non-profit think tank, free for low-income students, entirely grant-funded, and focused on ethics in science, governance, and investigative history. But as he stood at the top of the auditorium on opening day, watching a sea of young students take their seats in classrooms that were once locked to him, Marcus noticed something in the crowd. A man in a gray suit, silver hair. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. Marcus pushed through the doors, rushed into the hallway, turned left, then right. Empty. He was gone. But on the bench where he'd been sitting, there was a single envelope. Inside, a photograph. Marcus, as a child, standing outside his old apartment in Detroit. On the back, a handwritten note. This wasn't just about you. They were watching long before you arrived at Ridgewell. Be careful what else you try to uncover. Marcus stared at the note, his breath steady, his eyes cold. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. And next time, he wouldn't just buy the university. He'd bring down the entire system behind it.